cleanse your soul, feel it in your veins, breathe it in your lungs will stay. It's like love for the first time. It'll all make sense. You know it. It's like love cleanse your soul, feel it in your veins, breathe it in your lungs will stay.
Okay, that was a beautiful video. Good morning, good afternoon to all of you from India, Australia. Thank you for your time this morning and afternoon. My name is Vidya Sagram, and I'm the Director for Strategic Projects with Victorian Government Trade and Investment Office, South Asia, and also the Executive Committee member of the Indo-Australian Chamber of Commerce, Bengaluru chapter. I'm pleased to introduce today's session titled Edtech Startup Ecosystem, with a focus on consolidation across Edtech financing and role of VCs and private equities. Just to allude you to a couple of facts, 2020 was the best year for Edtech startups in India, with an unprecedented trajectory growth, with a record 1.2 billion investment. That's about 1/4 of the total VC investments, thereby making it the most funded sector in India. With Australia, more than 15% of the startups are focused on the education industry, making education technology the second largest startup industry in Australia. Australia has also been fostering innovation by hosting over 110 in-house incubators and accelerator programs based in various universities. So basically, this session is aiming to address a few subtopics or sub-themes: collaboration of startups with traditional education models in the future, edtech financing, is it expected to peak in the years post-COVID, or will it continue to grow in the long term? Consolidation in the edtech startup ecosystem over the next 3 to 5 years, role of VCs, private equities in facilitating infrastructure to address the gaps in access to online education. With this brief introduction, I would like to introduce the moderator of the session, Mr. Tony Hackett, Global Account Manager, NetApp. Tony has considerable experience working with startups, and his current role with the NetApp, he helps customers increase their business performance by leveraging the power of data. With NetApp's Startup Accelerator program, he helps innovators with their go-to-market strategy. Before his teaching and tech careers, he was a plumber, after which he received his undergraduate diploma in secondary education and a master's in technology management from Queensland's Griffith University. So quite a diverse career graph there, Tony. Thank you for moderating this session. Over to you.
Vision, thank you. And thank you for the generous introduction. And that plumbing career does seem a long time ago, but I am still brought into every now and then to bring those skills to the fore at home. And I'm pleased to be here today. It's just such a pleasure. Before we get underway, I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet. Here in Sydney, it's the Gadigal people. We pay respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people attending today. To the discussion. We have a great panel to discuss startup ecosystem, consolidation across edtech, financing, and the role of venture capital and private equity. I'll introduce our guests, our panelists. Christy Whitehill, who is the CEO of Tech Ready Women. Christy is an award-winning entrepreneur and mentor in the Australian tech space. In 2017, she founded the Tech Ready Women Academy, which is an education platform and network that provides women with world-class digital training programs and content for personal growth and business innovation. Christy, it's fantastic to have you here. We also have Jamie Engel. Jamie is the CEO and founder of Newtopia, which supports 21st century learning and builds community by creating meaningful peer-to-peer engagement. And they do this through Newtopia's leading online education platform, where they support the global transition to connected ways of learning for academic, corporate, and forward-thinking organisations. Welcome, Jamie. And we have Irfan Malik. Irfan is the chair at the Startups and Innovation Australia-India Business Council and is an integrator driving business IT partnerships and pioneering innovation internally across organisations. Also, Irfan is acknowledged in the IT and business leadership communities as an innovation champion for thought leadership and bringing outside in to enrich delivery practices and processes for successful business outcomes. And we'll also be joined shortly by our fourth panellist, Falgun Kompali, co-founder of Upgrad, where they are creating world-class programs to help prepare for the careers of tomorrow. Founded in 2015, Upgrad is India's largest online higher education company, providing programs in collaboration with top universities. Has an 85% program completion rate. They work across 30,000 paid learners, and more than 500,000 individuals have touched their courses globally. So we have a rich tapestry of knowledge and experience and interest in this topic, and we will get underway. We'll do it this way. We're going to break this large topic up into layers, and we're going to build, as we think about EdTech and startups, through to that topic around finance, VCs, and private equity. But nothing happens without audience, and we're all in the audience business. So I'd like to get us underway by asking for Christy to talk about how she thinks about audience and how her experiences and knowledge help guide her pursuing and securing and creating an audience with tech-ready women. Christy, over to you.
Thanks, Tony, for the introduction. And thank you, everyone. Really great to be here. Audience, one of my favorite topics, knowing your customer, finding your customer. It's something we teach a lot in Tech Ready Women's program. We actually run a early stage startup program, so focusing on how to validate an idea and then develop your MVP. And audience, like I guess when we started Tech Ready Women, there wasn't actually an organization like Tech Ready Women in Australia. There was already a lot of great organizations that were helping and supporting startups, especially female founder groups. Once they'd already had some traction, revenue, and had already had those runs on the board. So for us, it was really clear that we needed to focus our audience on early stage female founders, because that essentially for us and for the ecosystem was supporting women at that entry level, I guess what you'd call the top of the funnel, I guess customer founder. And so we knew that if we were actually going to help move the dial and increase the number of women in the industry, we were going to have to focus really at that early stage. So we designed our program specifically for early stage female founders. And I guess when we were going out and thinking about our audience, number one, and maybe it's just some tips, is really focusing on understanding who they are, what channels that they hang out on, what is their core problem, and by finding that out, it's just going out and speaking to them, I think I spoke to about over 100 women to really identify what was their core needs, what was their core problem, and then designed a solution that was based on exactly what their key pain points were. And I guess that's why we were so successful when we launched in the market back in 2017, because our program literally was made based on our target audience and what their key pain points were, and we were able to solve that immediately. So, when I think about audience, I think about really understanding your customer, really understanding where, what channels they're on, how big your audience is, and, how do you go after them and how do you attract them? So yeah, that's a bit of a start.
Christy, you talk about on the ground knowledge and collecting that knowledge and going talking to people. Do you think about experimentation in your business, or is that language you think about, or is there another way you think about going and testing the market?
Yeah, definitely. I've been in the technology industry for 10 plus years and developed over 30 technology products and services over the years. And so experimental, lean startup, really that test, measure, learn methodology has been a big instrumental play, even though we're a service-based business. So we're not technology. We do have an online component, but our key program teachers, really testing and validating at every step. And especially when you're building a technology product, that's really essential, is getting that customer feedback early on.
Fantastic. Jamie, maybe I could bring you into the conversation now. And with your business, how do you think about audience and trying to thin the universe down to those that you can really impact?
I'm finding it interesting, Tony, that you're starting this off talking about audience and using that word, because my prior career was in movies. So in LA, working on big Hollywood films, and you think of what the audience is for movies. And so my former background doing special effects and screenwriting really thinks about audience. So when I moved into education, I got asked if I want to be a teacher. I said yes. It sounded terrifying, and I thought, oh no, this will be interesting. And so with the students, I guess I hadn't labeled them audience, but I thought about them in those terms. So in the classroom, I was really thinking, okay, learning platform, don't know if I love the one that they're using. How can I create more curiosity? How can I use some of the things that I know from screenwriting and movie making, which is all about creating engagement for the audience, creating an emotional journey? And I was thinking, the hero's journey framework, if people out there know it, talks about the transformational journey of a human being from who they've been to who they'd like to be. And in all storytelling, thousands of years ago to now, you could call that audience around the campfire with storytelling. It doesn't have to be movies and high technology. It's just inbuilt to human psychology. And we get so inspired when we see a story and see a hero or heroine that goes on a transformational journey, because I think we're wired for wanting to do that in our own lives. So I kept pulling that idea back, thinking that the educational journey, you think 12 weeks of a term at a university, actually matches perfectly to the 12 stages of the hero's journey. And I was thinking, okay, so I'm taking my audience, my students, on an emotional journey. How can I make the learning experience, so the learning design, more exceptional, and use some of the screenwriting tools and part of that craft to craft an emotional journey, to create curiosity, to create intrinsic motivation to want to learn? How can I do that better at the program level? And then I started thinking, how can I do that better at the platform level? So I kind of started thinking in a framework that you have the platform, technology, could be a book, could be a piece of software, that's the technology platform. Then there's the program layer, which is fairly bespoke, like creating a movie. And then there's the people layer, which is the facilitation. So I was thinking in 3 layers that the most exceptional educational experiences have to hum at all 3 levels: platform, program, people. And so thought about the crafting of the course, the program. But then when I started looking at Newtopia, I was thinking, how do I create curiosity, intrinsic motivation learn built into the platform? And what technology platforms do exceptionally well is scaling. So how can I scale? And also the other thing is automation, to leave more time for a teacher to really facilitate well, and how to make the program more beautiful. So in thinking about the audience and thinking about emotional engagement, comes back to storytelling in movies. Make it really beautiful, make it really elegant experience, remove friction, create those emotions of delight, excitement, surprise, curiosity, and then how can the platform automate more and more of that? And then the other component is the social aspect, so the community aspect. So we really think at Newtopia, we're at the intersection of learning and community, and how do those two things work together? Because I think a lot of motivation and curiosity comes through working in a cohort, being part of a community of people, and that can sometimes pull you forward because you want to stay a part of the tribe. So that's a few ideas around how I think about audience and how we think about audience at Newtopia.
Thanks. That's a great start for us. And in fact, there's a very strong link to what Christy was describing about that on-the-ground knowledge, because if you're not getting that, what you just described is just an academic exercise, which is interesting in its own way, but doesn't deliver value to anybody. So thank you. That's a wonderful lead-in. Irfan, can I ask you to come into this conversation now and to talk to us in the way that you think about audience, and when you work on your own developing an audience and you help organizations think about how they identify and grow their audience, what are some reflections you would share with us today?
Thank you, Tony, for that brief intro and setting the kind of the tone for this session, talking about audience. And from my perspective, it's the stakeholders, depending on who you're dealing with. And as an ecosystem capacity builder, looking at Australia and India on a top level, at an ecosystem level, you've got various stakeholders, whether it's gov to gov, you've got the ecosystem partners in play, whether it's incubator accelerators. You've got the businesses here, whether it's institutions or like large educational institutions and universities and colleges, or and then end customers here. It could be the students or aspiring students or learners, people just wanting to skill up. And then, of course, investors as well, who are part of the equation, and then the whole community of mentors and advisors who all come into play as we curate and support startups to scale. So that's a good segue, obviously, to introduce where I play a role as a facilitator, as a bridge, as we facilitate Australia-India innovation collaboration between both the ecosystems. And as we work with startups, we really hone in on some of the three things which is paramount, especially when you're looking to scale. One is customer validation, where it's very aligned to what we're talking about, the audience, the customer validation, the market validation, and the investor validations. And all of them involve a typical audience or a stakeholder that, as a startup or scale up, you need to think about at various stages and various engagements and touch points you may have through the whole processes as you scale. So it's very important. And again, as I work with a multitude of startups, as they work on the product or the whole ideation, bringing one of the core elements for any startup or any solution. Obviously, you need to have the whole problem statement defined and alignment to a solution addressing the problem statement, and to be fit for purpose as well. So definitely aligning to the problem statement oriented to solve the challenges of the customer or the end user, but something which is fit for purpose. So that's a key element that I would want to look at. But also the other core part is the whole bringing human-centered design into, and the design thinking element from an end user perspective into your product and solution, of course. So aligning to a clear problem statement being defined, and then aligning to the solution to address the problem statement, catering to a customer need, fulfilling a need, and also being cognizant of a human-centered design, because that drives adoption, that drives engagement, and that drives impactful outcomes. So that's very important, even right from ideation phase, and you're working on your solution as you go through next phases. And one of the things which we really impart is to have co-founders by design. I mean, we believe that for you to be successful high growth venture, going through all those facets of your growth as a great success story to be unicorn, you need to have the right co-founders. I mean, it's not a one-person game. Ideally, it has been sometimes, but it's a bit of touch and go. And with the play that we are seeing, having the right co-founders to bring in those cross diverse elements to the leadership team is paramount. And that's something which is very important as well. And that's, again, important from the end game perspective. And as we go through various stakeholders, whether it's engaging gov agencies or engaging your ecosystem partners, whether it's incubator accelerators overseas in India or vice versa in Australia for Indian startups, it's important that they're very well positioned in terms of the engagement of the right audience, right partners, and the right outcome being clearly laid out, and of course focusing on the outcome as well. And then right through to investor relationship, that's again entirely different ball game. What kind of investors you engage, what kind of investor you bring on board at various stages of your growth story, all those are paramount. But ultimately, it's around how quickly you can adopt and align your product or service or solution to the end customer to meet their needs as well. And then there's also a sense of purpose that we are really focusing to impart to our startups, so that there is another tacit element of the end customers, which is on the heart side, and the purpose side is also fulfilled as a part of your any solution. So these are some of the key things that comes to my mind as we curate and support startups to scale. And most importantly, as I said, human-centered design, knowing the end customer and the whole journey, and the elements that really take and being fit for purpose are the things that resonate for me. Over to you.
Irfan, wonderful coverage for us there. And it's, I think, in some ways, what you've just shared sets us up to move toward that part of the topic, which is around finance. But we started audience before we get to talking about that finance. there are a couple of areas I'd like to actually draw the panel into now, and to talk about content, but also to talk about user experience, because we want to be able to bring people in, deliver the value, and have them feel good about that. So, Jamie, maybe if I could get you to lead us into this next part of our conversation and talk about how you think about user experience, and maybe even lead us into how you think about content. I'm not too sure if it's fair to ask you to break the two apart, but I'll leave it up to you.
Okay, sure. I'll do my best, Tony. So I'm a great lover of UX design, user experience, game design, behavior design, all of that. And I think when I started working on Utopia, I was looking at products, other products like Spotify, Facebook, Slack, and just thinking, wow, isn't it interesting that at that time when I started, there wasn't a lot of thinking in the learning space using those design patterns and that UX, that very refined UX. And I thought that makes such a difference in the journey. So it might be the use of it for recommendations, personalization, making content really relevant, but also things like delight and the huge difference. So tying back to what I was saying prior about screenwriting and storytelling and movie making, that's a really, really, really refined user experience. And the top movies, it's so polished and so much work goes into the pre-visualization of the movie, turning the script blueprint into the previs. And it's very similar to developing a software product where you go through those stages of doing the early human-centered design that Malik is talking about, and then slowly building in layers, refining it. But I think the UX, what it ties into is the emotions. That really good UX, first off, it removes any painful emotions from any friction in a product, so that it's really easy and intuitive to use. You don't need to read a handbook to know how to use it. And people can adopt it very quickly. So again, I was thinking, well, why you don't really need to reinvent design patterns that are working. If people are used to Spotify and functionality, just move it over into the learning space and then it's familiar right away. And I think all of the really good UX removes the pain, but then it creates that delight. So I just started using Telegram recently. I thought, oh, it's so interesting. It's not that different from WhatsApp, except it's in the very small details, the little bits of polish, removing some friction, and then the stickers, surprisingly, I'm finding really enjoyable. I thought, wow, that's again, bringing things that are very emotive into a product, but it's those little moments of enjoyability that start adding up, and then you want to use it more and more. So again, I'm looking at Telegram going, gosh, that should be in a platform for learning because it's the thing that pulls you in, and then removing friction, it just smooths out so that the UX is really pulling you forward. And so the more that we can, in the learning space, remove blockages, friction, and, you think for many people, learning, it doesn't occur as something enjoyable. There isn't a lot of curiosity. It's more like, I have to do this to achieve a credential. That if we can flip that and make the UX so elegant and so beautiful that it makes you want to be there, makes you want to connect with peers, again, using all the social patterns in social platforms, just bring it over and just make that enjoyability, really highlight that. I think maybe we come back to content because that's another big topic, and let some other people contribute.
Fantastic. Thank you. Mind you, I think what you've just highlighted there, in my mind at least, is this baseline expectation of user experience, where every moment something is a little bit more, to use your word, polished, and all of a sudden our tolerance of something that isn't exceptional, our tolerance is matching it as we go along. So I think you've led us in beautifully there. Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah.
And Belgan, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Maybe I'll give you the double header question. So I'm sorry if I missed you just coming in toward the end of the audience. Could you maybe speak to how Upgrade and how you think about audience, and then maybe just give us a little bit about user experience and how you think about that as well?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Tony. Sorry, I think there was some problem with the link that was sent to me. So I was in the participants pool and it took me time to just move here. But I'm glad to be here. And just to answer your question, Tony, in terms of how we think of audience, especially when we're looking at the India market. For us, given Upgrade is one of the largest online higher education companies, When we started off, our thinking was very clear that the vision for Upgrad is to be the lifelong learning partner for somebody in higher education. And for us, that started when somebody was 17, 18 years old to the time they are 65, right? And in this particular journey, there are two clear segments for us when we think of audience. The first is this 18 to 24 age group, which is doing the formal education, which is the first bachelor's or the first master's. And the second is working professionals who are looking at upskilling, because now the industry and trends are changing very fast. Skills required are changing very fast. People are moving jobs really fast. So they need to upskill to remain relevant. So these are the two segments of audience we saw in the market, where we said there's formal education and there's continuous upskilling. And while over the last 6 years, we have built a very strong presence in the in the working professional space, where we have some amazing programs in data, digital marketing, management, technology, which are all relevant, evolving areas. Now we've also started to build a strong position in the degree space, where we feel that there is a lot of value that we can add by providing high quality online programs for people who do not have access to great quality education offline. So those are the two ways in which we think of segments, right? In terms of experience, it is the reason why Upgrad exists and why we started Upgrad in the first place. Because as I said, before Upgrad, I was working with Parthenon, which also was in education, and I spent a lot of time looking at higher education globally. And one of the things we realized was that higher education is broken, not just in India, but globally. And there are three pillars that we need to fix. The first is access, the second is affordability, and the third is quality. And if you fix these three, you can deliver high quality education at scale. And online was really exciting in terms of what it could achieve in terms of solving for that problem. But the way online education was evolving, it was becoming more access to a content library as compared to actually delivering high quality, rigorous education. So that's where we felt that, look, there is a lot that can be done in terms of building out the online learning experience to actually make it very structured, meaningful, engaging, that delivers on outcomes for students. So for us, this entire experience is a combination of 3 or 4 things. The first is just the content, pedagogy, instructional design, and storytelling, right? How do you create educational content that you can binge watch, right? Something that Jamie touched upon briefly, and we can talk more about that. But how do you make it Game of Thrones or House of Cards, which you cannot switch without watching the next episode, right? How do you take that storytelling and instructional design to the next level? The second part is the learning management system, where we have built the LMS from scratch on our own, because we felt that we need that kind of flexibility to bring in new pedagogical elements, building new interactive features, etc. The last part of that experience for us is the support services that students get. Academic support. When a student has a query, how does that get resolved? When they are struggling with a certain topic, how does that get resolved? Very, very strong academic support which students can rely on. The second part is non-academic support, where how do you make sure that you serve as a mentor for the student to manage their motivation over a 2-year, 3-year period, right? Obviously, if you're a mentor that every student gets at Upgrad, you are reacting to student queries, but as a mentor, I'm also looking at 100,000 data points of the learner in terms of when they log in, which video they're reminding with, they're struggling with, are they falling behind on deadlines, and I can proactively engage with them and we can define interventions. So we do that to make sure we are handholding. The last part is career support services, to make sure that not only academic rigor is covered, but also holistically rounded and provide with the right opportunities so that they can get the career outcome. So a combination of all of this, instructional design, content pedagogy, learning management system, and finally support services, is what we call the Upgrad learning experience in that sense, which we believe is a great online user experience. Obviously, still evolving. Every day we push to make it more innovative so that we can make it more engaging. But that's how we think about this, all of this coming together to deliver on what you started off by saying, 85% completion rate, 70% outcomes for all of our learners.
Fantastic, thank you. And you've got me very keen to, once we've heard from a couple of our guests about the user experience, to get back to Jamie and get his reflection on what you've covered when we think about the hero's journey and the storytelling. But before we get to there, Irfan, maybe I'll come to you next. And so when you think about user experience, what are the things that go through your mind as you're helping organizations think about their go-to-market and their development?
Great, thank you. As I touched on, any organization, any startup or any solution, we give a lot of focus on human-centered design. But also these days, because there's been a lot of, the levels of UX and, the expectations have been set. So we look at, in fact, I was in a session with a startup earlier where we were talking about, can we curate a product which will give experience of Uber to Spotify, Amazon, the marketplace, and Slack in terms of collaboration, and community like an Instagram. So we've got, reference play already where there is an implied expectation from users. Well, I used to get that kind of feature earlier, and I expect this. So there's an implied expectation as well that startups and organizations need to be cognizant of. But one of the most important thing which I would, again, especially in the edtech space, we need to be factoring in is not only the user experience, but the whole journey as well. It's not like a training center that you're coming online or you're leaving and getting the certificates. It's about how you maintain the whole entire journey from the awareness outreach to onboarding, engaging, and of course the content quality. Without saying it goes that it is important, but even beyond that whole program is delivered, how do you maintain that continuum of that relationship? So it's not user experience upfront to entice and onboard the customer or the user, in this case a student or aspiring student, but it's also how do you maintain a continuum of that user experience and throughout the journey. And one of the areas which, again, I'm focusing, and I think Jamie and it resonates with quite a few of us, is where a lot of organizations have missed out on the alumni or people who've been associated with your organization or your program. How do we really maintain that continuum so that they are ongoing engaged with us, and again contribute and leverage from what you've curated? So that's something which is also very paramount in terms of looking at the user experience, not just to entice and acquire the customer. Is the user experience right through the journey and maintaining the continuum beyond the initial connect or initial engagement as well, so that they come back and they leverage a lot more. And they also, a key element is the community feel. They come on board and they have got that intrinsic connection with this platform or this solution, that they're part of the community, not only being a consumer of the community, but also a contributor, a collaborator, a co-curator as well. So, and they obviously, whether there is revenue streams or just value streams being created, that's all how you want to shape. But the user experience right through the journey and curating a community element is what's the key. And I think I'm quite excited about Jamie and Utopia and other products in play, which are definitely aligned to some of those outcomes being achieved. So quite excited about this space.
Fantastic. Raising community in this conversation is a very powerful word as well. It starts to think about how you sustain the engagement, and is there truly a foundation of value, not just the transaction of value. So Irfan, thank you for bringing that into our discussion now. Christy, maybe I could get you now to share some thoughts around how you think about user experience, and maybe even if there's an experience where there's been some surprise for you about what your misconceptions may have been, and how you were able to draw that out of your community to help you adjust in the market.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways I guess I could approach this topic. One from the mind of an early stage startup founder and what they think about UX, and the common mistakes that I have seen and continuously see and have personally made myself. And then there's also, I guess, in terms of customer experience and how important that has been for tech-ready women, and our own engagement and the success of the founders who go through our education program. But I guess most importantly, I think for those who are startup founders on this call, and maybe early stage startup founders, I think one of the things that I've seen, one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen for early stage founders who might not come from a technical background or have even worked in a technology startup, is missing and not placing enough importance on UX and and not enough value there. It's one of the key steps to ensuring that you're onboarding your customers successfully, that you're really mapping out the product and that customer journey so that your users and customers have a great experience and ultimately purchase, or you can generate revenue. So very important. It's one of the biggest steps that I see first-time founders actually just miss, and they go straight into development and actually miss that kind of step. But then for tech-ready women, I think for us it's been, even though we're service-based, we do have an online component, which we started off running face-to-face workshops and, practice what we preach. We're very experimental. We surveyed our customers. We continuously interviewed our customers as they came through the program to really understand the experience that they were having. And then quickly, I guess by program 2, we'd actually digitalized it, automated it, and created a better experience, because we found that the women who were going through our program, 60% were mums, and trying to juggle learning, education, a completely new way of thinking, as well as, being a busy parent, as well as working a full-time job, most of them, and trying to build a startup. It was actually quite overwhelming for them to do the course. So that was something that we implemented very early on based on our own research and making sure we're validating and really listening to our customer to create the best customer experience, I guess, user customer experience for them. And so we digitalized it, and now we have an online program, and we run what you call a flipped learning methodology. So we're actually purely online now. We're running programs just online at the moment. But in the past, it was very much, learn the educational module, then come in and you'd have mentor sessions post, or facilitated sessions post, to really be able to apply what you had learnt, because, we all are different learners as well. And we found the success rate from implementing that was much higher, because they had so much more time and they were able to practically implement what they were learning on the online module. So, yeah, I mean, it's been instrumental for us to be really focused on creating the best UX, CX possible for our business.
Thank you. That's a really profound story. And to be able to serve the community that you serve and to bring that sort of value, it's just a credit to what you're doing. It really is. I just find it so meaningful.
Thank you.
One thing you triggered in my mind, though, this last year, which by any measure, a little bit extraordinary, has there been any surprise in that year that, there've been a lot of surprises, but is there anything that really jumped off the page and you thought, wow, I didn't expect that to be coming up in the last 12 months?
Do you know what? I think, and it's probably not really a surprise, but the amount of government support now has been fantastic, to be honest. So we are, in the past, we're like, the amount of proposals and the amount of, what's the word? It's just going out there and really, really trying to get more support was a lot, even though we were getting support, but it was a lot harder. But I guess now I think the government especially, I think a lot of organizations now are just seeing the importance of online education and learning. Like, I was involved in projects maybe a couple of years ago, which I led a research on understanding the skills gap with kids learning STEM at school. And just is such an important platform that was getting built, and the government just not seeing any importance of it. But now it's like, hello, how important is Edtech? And it's just, yeah. So it's not really a surprise, but it's nice,
Great reflection. In fact, as you're describing it, I was picturing all of my own emotions and thought patterns over this last 12 months. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Falcon, I'd like to come back to you now, because when I think about content, and before we came to this session today, having gone to the Upgrade site, some amazing content, and your reach of having touched 500,000 people around the globe, 30,000 people as paying students onto your platform. I'd love to hear you talk about content, the way you think about content, the challenges that you face every day to maintain currency and to continue a lifelong learning relationship with these customers that you have. So could you come in now, please?
Sure. No, absolutely. Thanks, Tony, for that question. And I think when we think of content as upgrade, right? I mean, it's for me. I would like generally. Even when my team talks to me, I say that look, let's not refer to this learning experience only as content, right? Because if somebody says my favorite book is content or my favorite music is content, I know we can refer to it as content, but you're really diminishing the value of what it means as an entire experience, right? So generally, I try and avoid referencing anything as content and more as experience. So that's where we as an institution stand on how we think about this. Where content, which is the recorded video, is a small part of it as compared to the overall value proposition and the experience that we're stitching together. So from that standpoint, when we think of what kind of experiences of which content is a part that we want to provide students, there are 2 or 3 things that we have over time realized that are very, very important and students value a lot in terms of making sure that they get the right experience and outcomes. The first, when we talk about education, especially higher education, I think just what we have seen is that the person, the instructor and the faculty become extremely important, right? We have a bag of tricks in terms of how to take it from X to Y, but just the presence, the personality of the instructor, of the faculty and their passion, I think truly comes to light, not just in a classroom, but also in online learning. So we have worked with some amazing faculty. We have trained them how to become, we say that look, whenever we work with the faculty, we say that we know that you're a great theater artist. We want to make you a great movie artist now, or a movie star, right? So that process is not an easy journey for everybody, but we work with them, but their passion and their energy and their own expertise really comes to light. That's the first part. The second part in terms of content, especially for us in education, is that we do not want the faculty, even when they're speaking, just to be showing their face on the video. Right? There's a lot of other things that we do while the faculty is speaking, B-rolls, graphics, animations, edit, to make sure that, again, the entire experience is very engaging. As I said, it's our effort to make it HBO level content in terms of engagement. There are 2 or 3 other key elements that we do as part of making sure the entire experience is very engaging for students. The second part of that is very hands-on, active case study based learning, right? Where we go to all the major companies in India and also now globally to ask them, okay, what are the 5 exciting projects that you guys are working on or have worked on in the last 12 months? And why don't we build case studies out of that? And then we open up these case studies to our learners who then work in a real life setting saying that, well, how would you deal with this problem? And then they get personalized feedback, but also the industry expert comes and says that, look, this is how we are trying to deal with it, or this is how we have done it. So that's, again, something that students value a lot. Last part is, again, this is where there's still a lot of work to be done, but making sure that we provide a lot of hands-on simulations as well that students can play with. So we work with multiple companies, multiple universities where we can use and build simulations in collaboration with them, where students can, again, have a very hands-on experience. So that's broadly how we package all of this together to make sure that we can deliver on the value proposition. The last part of this is, I think when we started off as our brand, we said that, look, we want to be in long-form learning because it's hard for me to teach somebody data science in 3 weeks. Right? It takes 12 months to become a great data scientist. So we started off with that thought process, and I think it has held us in good stead over time, where we focus on this long-form, rigorous programs. But over time, what we have realized is that different people are looking for different options, and they need flexibility. So not everybody is willing to commit that kind of time, money, etc. And now I think it was a great starting point, and we picked the right starting point. But now we are also starting to move into other forms of shorter experiences, master classes, etc. in the short form content as well, to make sure that we can engage people and deliver value to people who are not looking at a significant amount of investment upfront.
Tremendous. And Jamie, this feels like the perfect time to bring you back into the conversation now and to get your thoughts around content. As you started to lead us into the hero's journey and storytelling before, could you take us through how you and the Newtopia team think about that content side of the equation?
Yep, sure. Falcon, that was great. Really enjoyed hearing that. I think we think very similar, the value of content and making it beautiful. I guess I see content, there's two types or two ends of the spectrum. You have content curation. There's so much incredible, great stuff on the web. And when I'd been teaching, I really was just kind of curating TED Talks and conference talks and realized I could create incredible programs just by sort of being a DJ, putting together great content that was already out there, but thinking about the order. So thinking, where's there a moment of delight? Where is there something short? Where is there something long form? Really crafting it as a journey and moving through different emotional spaces and different pacing. So that's fully curated. And then at the other end is what some of the stuff Falcon was talking about, beautiful high production value filming. And I have a great love of that as well. And I think you have both ends and then everything in between. The other way of thinking about it is the mode in which it's going to be used. So you have, like I was describing, someone, a teacher, a learning designer, creating a guided learning journey. So could be modeled on the hero's journey, could be modeled on something else, but crafting that stages of the journey. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a self-guided learning. So if someone's really motivated, think about when you're interested in a topic and you do a deep dive and you just start Googling stuff, and then you've been on the internet for 5 hours, just going across and discovering things, and there's a bit of serendipity, and you just are kind of mining for information. So there's the guided journey of learning, there's the self-guided journey of learning, and then the third one is the peer-to-peer way of learning, where people are sharing things with you. And so that's the more community-based way of learning that's also really powerful, because it's a group effort, it's a social effort or a social experience. And you think of all the ways that we get information through LinkedIn or Facebook or Slack or any other type of group. And that's another way of learning. So I think it's thinking, I guess, in a simple way that you have the content, the two different forms, so the curated and the created, and then you have the mode that the content moves. So it's guided, it's self-guided, or it's peer-to-peer. And they're all valid. So I think we're trying to build the flexibility in the platform so it can serve whichever mode is most powerful for that moment of learning or that way of learning.
Fantastic, Jamie. Thank you. And Irfan, what I might do next is ask you to take on two questions. I know that you'll be leaving us a little bit early. You need to go and moderate a session during the day, which is fantastic. Could I maybe get you to speak a little bit to content, just to round that topic out? But if you could then lead us into discussing finance, and you work with startups and you help people think through the questions of finance and the things that go through your mind when you think about venture capital, private equity, or just financing with the broader banner.
Well, thank you, Tony, again. On that note, I think, all those things that Falgun, Christy, and Jamie, you touched on, content is all quite important and have a significant role to be considered as you look at solution to, really align to what the end customer needs are. One more element I will touch on, and maybe a couple of them as I weave that story. I'm someone who's been part of both ecosystems. So I grew up in India through my K-12 to engineering. So you are groomed in a rigid, structured way of education. That's what we've come through, a journey. And even coming to Australia, whilst it was for my business and consulting, but being aligned with the education, whether it's university education, the graduate business schools here, or with professional and corporate training houses as well that we've engaged. Right through these journeys that I've experienced, I can see now obviously there's a lot of disruption. In particular, I want to call out what the Indian government and in India that's happened over the last year or so, where the entire education system that we call the rigid structured system has been disrupted, where it's all more skill-based and role-based, and it's more need-based rather than a structured flow. This is what you do and acquire and stuff. Where even whilst we thought STEM itself is very happening thing, the thinking beyond STEAM plus and getting into areas where some of the consumers, even some of the young kids who are looking at AI, ML while they're in year 7, year 8, they're looking to code. I mean, we have seen quite a lot of success stories that's been curated, where it's again about what the end user needs. And the important element is the important R, which is the relevance. Relevance and the content being relevant, and obviously the user experience, all those goes without saying that has to be phenomenal. But yeah, the relevance is a key element. And there's a great opportunity now, obviously, in India, where the whole structure is being disrupted. And it's a new way of thinking, new way of consuming this content on these programs. And flipping the model of, a course-based view to more skill-based learning. It's a learning experience that we are going to be offering, and that's what's going to be in demand, is definitely a key for us to consider as we serve up content and look at solution. And as I touched on earlier as well, that community element, the peer-to-peer that Jamie mentioned, growing up, even whilst in India those days, and even here, we never had a concept of having mentors right through. I mean, we had some tutors and program coordinators and assistants, but never there was a concept of mentor. But now that's possible through these platforms, where we can bring those real world examples, whether it's case studies or even some kind of an online or remote internship or guidance, some cues that brings that industry real world practical perspective into the program that helps validate that content as well. So relevance and validation, and that gives a bit of a fulfillment to the end customer, and that drives that continual engagement with the platform and things like that. So those are some of the things that I would love to touch. But going into the exciting space of investment, obviously I was just in a large showcase event, where we are doing a global investor showcase across, from Australia to the Americas, and we have got a core India stream coming up as well next week to be streamed with one of our partners, Wholesale Investors, where it's about, what's the right fit. And I mean, having that conversations with various startups at various stages, it's phenomenal. I mean, obviously, it's very important to choose the right investor, the right, stage, and what the investors look for as well. That's something which is quite critical that I see, which the startups and the scale-ups need to be looking at. Now, one thing goes without saying is looking at strategic investors, and especially in the early stages. It's not about the VC and just the growth, the 10x growth. Of course, that needs to be part of your vision, and all of us aspire to curate high growth ventures, and all of us aspire to support being part of high growth ventures. But beyond that, I mean, we need to be aligned to the fact that we need strategic investors, and that could be early co-founders to the mentors, the advisors who come in and obviously put in money as well. But people who will go beyond just the money or the investment, who can bring in the connects, the network, the partnership, and any platform. And just as upgrade we've seen, there is obviously getting to that critical mass of subscribers or users or community, B2B or B2C or those customers. It's very important. So it's not only the money or the investment, it's also the connect network and the strategic value that investors can bring at various stages that needs to be considered. And from an investor perspective as well, I mean, they look at quite a lot of things at various stages. It's not, I mean, definitely they look at the team and the core founders, what they bring, not only in terms of the longevity, but also in terms of the whole USP of the platform, the solution, the whole, the solution and its sustainability is critical as well. But also how, there's a focus on revenue and growth of both. In fact, in certain cases, we've seen, there's not been much of focus. It's about acquisition of customer base, which is relevant even in Edtech as well, where you may be making losses, but you're acquiring more customers, and you've got this premium model where it's about onboarding more customers. That's all good. But ultimately, as we go through the rest of the stages, revenue growth is also pretty important. And that's something which, as investors, are looking for. And the other aspect is obviously, collaboration partnerships to scale. Gone are the days where we traditionally looked at scale-ups working through their, a small cohort of region, state, country, and then regional countries or things like that. Now with the open innovation, markets are accessible. So thinking about global markets, global validation, it's got a profound impact in curating those high growth ventures, and investors like that validation of a global scale validation. You have global customers or global investor or even global market validation. They look for that. So those are some of the elements that we look for, and we kind of support startups when they're looking to scale into India or vice versa. So yeah, there's quite a lot of elements, and I can speak the day long, but yeah, definitely keen to impart things. And again, it's being selective, really looking at, and there are options out there, and more. In fact, India has seen a phenomenal growth of investor options right from early stage to VCs and curating unicorns. We've got a lot of unicorns. Even during COVID, we had about 11 unicorns come out of India, which is a great story. So there is a lot of options in the market. In Australia, we've had challenges in the early stage fundraise, which has been a global challenge, but we have seen. But more and more, there are platforms who bring investors, and with more technology-led AI-based matching, they're able to get, just like wholesale investors, we are able to get more aligned early-stage investors as well. But again, being choosy about the investors, what kind of strategic value they bring to the table at various stages, that's critical. And yeah, working with the right partners who will also bring that growth. There's one more element which is very important, and this sector addresses. It's that purpose element, and which is also important for a lot of startup investors, is the alignment to some social purpose and UN SDG goals. So if there are elements that brings, there's another whole equation of investors who open up to look at these propositions. So I'll probably end on that note, and we'll let other folks to address some of those points.
Fantastic, thank you. You're mentioning strategic alignment is so important. I was having a conversation with a startup founder maybe about 3-4 weeks ago, and I was asking him how he thought about coaches and mentors. And he said that it was important to him that he was able to find a coach or a mentor that was successful, but not that successful that they've forgotten it can be hard. So you need to have somebody who has a more than just a business interest in what you're doing, but somebody who is able to truly go shoulder to shoulder with you. I think that's a point that you've made really clearly for us there. So thank you. Christy, maybe I could come to you now and get your thoughts on that financing side. And as you think about if you're looking for external funding, or if you're giving advice to another startup about how they should think about funding, what would you be saying?
Well, and depends on what stage the startup is at. I guess an early stage startup, I would say go out and see if you can start generating revenue before you even look for investors. So that's a really great way to start funding your business, is proving out that the customers actually want to pay for it. But obviously sometimes that might not be the strategy, and you do need to raise investment early. And I guess, for early stage founders especially, it's your typical first round is, or, unless you've got a lot of experience and that you've got a great investor network and they're going to back you from day one. But typically, for most people, it is the journey of friends, family, fools, going out and seeing who in your network wants to support and back you. And there's other ways as well, I guess, for early stage startups to access funding, and that's through the platforms like Equitize here in Australia, the crowdfunding platforms that can help you to raise money off a wider audience. Works really well for B2C kind of companies. I know a lot of women in particular have had a lot of success from companies like that, from the crowdfunding. I guess there's might be a bit less bias as well, but there's friends, family, fools. You've got your crowdfunding platforms. You've got your early stage angel investor networks as well that you can reach out and tap into. In order to find those, it's just getting out and networking. It's like the key thing. Like when I started in the industry, I would think I was at events 3 nights a week. You can't do that these days with 2 little kids and, so many things going on. But, it's just so important to build your network and to really be able to access great investors. It's about really knowing your customer. It's putting together an amazing pitch deck. And if you don't know how to do that, there's plenty of courses in order to help teach you, as well as other mentors, as Malik was talking about. Really important to find great mentors around you. Tech Ready Women's program, we interviewed our alumni, and mentors was like the key value that they got out of our program, because we essentially had vetted a community of mentors who were there for the right reasons and wanted to support them. And not only that, they got support from a community of mentors, so they were able to tap into all sorts of skill sets from product management through to investment and pitching. And that's another point, I guess, when it comes to seeking capital. If you find you're not being successful in the early days, like it typically takes a lot of doors to knock on, and finding the right investor for you is it's like finding partners at the end of the day. These people have got to be really aligned with your own purpose, the mission of the business. Strategic is really important in early stages as well. Because you want smart money, you want people that can actually help you to drive that growth and get you to the next stage before you get to even VC capital. So, there's so much you can talk about, but I'll leave it there and let somebody else have a chat.
Very powerful word you use, by the way, bias. And that feels like that's a session on its own.
Another day.
As you entered that into the conversation, truly made me think about things a little bit differently. So thank you. Falcon, maybe I can come to you next. And when we think about Edtech and we think about finance funding, it'd be great to get your perspective on how you think about that, and also how you would give advice to another startup in the Edtech sector as to the way they should think about considering funding, whether it's VC or private equity or the like. What are your considerations?
Yeah. My personal view is that you should try and avoid taking external money for as long as possible, right? You should build it out. It's a slightly harder journey, but I think it's a much more fulfilling journey, which you're in complete control of. Obviously, at various points of time, you will need to bring in external partners, not just for capital, but for the other benefits that you can get in terms of mentorship, challenging you, brainstorming partner, etc. Right? So my personal view is that based on my experience, I would try and avoid taking money for the sake of making headlines, right? Because I know that I see at least a lot of this happening in India, where people are so obsessed about raising money because somebody else has done it and they're in the headlines and you feel like you're being left out. But my advice would be that is not important. The important part is to just focus on the consumer and the product and build that out, and only be very, very careful and choosy in terms of who you want to partner with, because the incoming investor, be it a VC or be it a private equity party, needs to be very clear about the vision of the business, where you want to drive it, the pace at which you want to drive it, and make sure that you find yourself the right partner in what should ideally be a very, very long-term journey. And not, if there is not the right alignment, then I think it can lead to major problems, lack of motivation, where I know a lot of people have come back and said that, look, but now I don't feel motivated anymore. So I think there are all those challenges. So my personal advice would be that do not get carried away with other people making headlines. Somebody is always getting richer, becoming more famous than you faster, and that's not a problem. You need to focus on your consumer, your product, your journey, and make sure that you find the right partners for that.
Fantastic. So, Jamie, to you, what would you give as your considerations from the Newtopia perspective around looking at financing, and how you would give your advice to an up-and-coming founder as to how they should think about funding?
Sure. My thoughts would correlate with what everyone else has said, very similar. I think I've been challenged to develop product, and I think the challenges in retrospect have been really good. because it forces you to keep refining, keep looking for product market fit, and not moving too quickly when maybe it's not the best time to move quickly. So really honing the product. And I think, as Falcon said, it's being very, very careful and reflecting and developing relationships over a bit of time, because it's only over a bit of time that you get to see if it's the right alignment and if the values are aligned. I think that sets the right foundation. So just like building the team and the people that you're going to be working with for the long term to build the company, it's so important to have value alignment there, because if it's not aligned and people are pulling in different directions, that's just not a pleasant experience. And so if you have good alignment with the team, it's as important with the investors, because that also is a long-term relationship, and that everyone is seeing a fairly similar vision of where everyone is working to get to. And that also the investors coming on board, it's so much more than the money. It's their passions, it's their interests, it's their knowledge, it's their mentorship, it's their camaraderie. And knowing that, yep, it's good when things are going good, but when you hit challenges, how are people going to behave? How are they going to support one another? And just like having that support on the team, having that support from investors, understanding, and from their pattern recognition, some of the things that might happen ahead, where if you don't have that as a first-time founder, that pattern recognition is so valuable, where people can go, oh, these are the spaces that you'll probably hit. So just preparing you for it. And then when you hit that, someone saying that's totally normal. And I know with some of the people on the team that are mentors to me, that's so valuable, because it removes a feeling as a founder that maybe something's wrong, that you go, oh, these are normal spaces that can be expected. So I think from the key team and also from the investors, that beyond the money, it's some of those aspects in some ways are more important, because you can always find more money, but having the right value alignment and camaraderie, that's harder to find. Yeah.
It feels like a wonderful way to wrap us up. And if I was to think about what we've discussed over the last little bit over an hour, and we came to talk about startups in the Edtech ecosystem and to work out what that might be from a financing point of view and how people might go and get funding to grow. And if I layer it up, and it started when Christy spoke about going and talking to 100 people and just understanding what they want. Audience is about understanding the customer. User experience is about understanding the customer. Content is about understanding the customer. And ultimately, the advice and the finance can come from a number of places. But if it doesn't come with the ability to get a deeper understanding of your audience and your market, then it's somewhat all for naught. That is my summation of what we've actually covered over the last hour. And if that's close to right, I'll use that as my closing piece and thank Christy, Jamie, Falcon, and I know Irfin's just had to drop off to go and moderate another session. It's been my honour and pleasure to be a part of this with you this afternoon. Thank you for your investment, and thank you to the Indo-Australian Chamber of Commerce for putting this session together as well. I've learned a lot and I feel motivated leaving today. So thanks to everybody for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony, for the session, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. See you guys later.
We share the light. We share the land. We share this journey. Join us for the adventure. Our country.
is waiting for you.